they've done to us at the border should never and can never be forgotten. It's a sin what they did, and you are helping us out, and we appreciate it.
Thanks. Thank you. Actually, what you're doing with the border is remarkable. It has dropped, what, 95%? It's incredible.
That, as of this morning, 99%, 99.1% to be exact.
Why are those numbers not in the media?
Well, they get out with the fake news, you know, like CNN over here doesn't want to put them out because they don't like putting out good numbers. They only like putting out because I think they hate our country, actually.
President Donald Trump sat down with El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele earlier today to further coordinate on detaining criminal aliens removed from the United States, particularly Trende Aragua gang members, as Venezuela continues to refuse to repatriate those citizens of their country, paramilitary troopers. Obviously, Bukele and Trump, they're having what seems to be good camaraderie, joking about the media. And if there's one thing's for sure is that the MS-13 gang members and Trende Aragua are getting some backup from the corporate media. One MS-13 gang member named Kilmar Armando Abrego Garcia arrested in the company of MS-13 gang members back in 2019 is getting defended, particularly by even Fox News, who is very concerned about his detention in El Salvador. Here's White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller schooling Fox sycophant Bill Hemmer.
Do you still
He's an illegal alien from El Salvador. Hold on, this is important. In 2019, he was ordered deported. He has a final removal order from the United States. These are things that no one disputes. Where is he from? El Salvador. Where is he a resident and citizen of? El Salvador. Is he here illegally? Yes. Does he have a deportation order? Yes. A DOJ lawyer who has since been relieved of duty, a saboteur, a Democrat, put into a filing incorrectly that this was a mistaken removal. It was not. This was the right person sent to the right place. Now, some have said, well, but he had a thing called a withholding order. So a withholding order means you've been ordered deported, but an immigration judge is saying you cannot go back to a particular country. Here's the thing. If you are a member of a foreign terrorist organization, you cannot have a withholding order. Since he's in MS-13, there is no withholding order. Furthermore, the gang that he is accused of being persecuted by doesn't exist anymore in El Salvador. The 18th Street gang is gone. So you have an illegal alien from Bill, where are we supposed to send the illegal alien from El Salvador?
You haven't even allowed me to ask you a question. Are you convinced he is still a member of MS-13? That was your original charge.
Yes. But here's the thing, Bill. Yes, but here, not only am I convinced of it, not only is El Salvador convinced of it, Bill, he's an illegal alien from El Salvador with the deportation order. So his only options in life, Bill, his only options in life are to be deported to El Salvador or to be deported to some other country. That's it. He has a deportation order. So, Bill, you tell me, what country should we deport him to? Tell me, please. Tell me.
White House correspondent Kara Castronova. It's good to see you, Kara. Speaking of that illegal immigrant, the alleged MS-13 gang member, two different judges and two different courts found there was sufficient evidence to support that he's actually an MS-13 gang member, which, you know, Bill Hemmer has a hard time believing. But despite that, he's obviously the latest martyr for not only the corporate media, but also Democrats. Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland has asked for a meeting with President Bukele. He also looks to pressure for the return of that illegal gang member from El Salvador's prison. He's saying if that doesn't happen, that he plans to go to El Salvador himself next week. I'm just sure President Bukele is shaking in his boots at the thought of Senator Van Hollen coming down there. It's good to see you, Kara. What were your thoughts on the meeting? It seems like they have a good rapport, Bukele and President Trump.
Certainly seems like the president of El Salvador has an incredible amount of respect for President Trump and, views people like this Democrat senator that you're talking about probably as not a friendly person that he would ever have a sit down meeting with. I just don't visualize it happening after witnessing today just how much respect these two men had for each other and how much they obviously plan on working together with the future of President Trump. I'm I'm assuming hoping to be able to continue to send criminals down to El Salvador and utilize prisons down there, while the president of El Salvador obviously wanting to capitalize on trade and even tourism coming from the United States. So I don't see him meeting with a Democrat anytime soon.
Now, I played that clip of Stephen Miller and Bill Hemmer, and we could get into some of the DOJ implications of what we heard Miller say, that there was a saboteur at the DOJ. That's a whole different topic that I know Allison Steinberg is going to go into more detail with when it comes to the Department of Justice with Vanessa Broussard at the top of the 3 o'clock hour, especially since they are now being sued, the DOJ, by Tom Fitton's group for the remaining Epstein files. But in regards to this whole deportation order, Bukele said he's not under any circumstances going to release this guy and send him back. And it sounds like there was more of an exchange with Marco Rubio and Stephen Miller in the media in the Oval Office. It got a little heated there, didn't it?
It did get heated, and I thought it went really well, because I think finally, once and for all, these Trump officials were able to really explain to the American public their stance, and it made perfect sense, really. And the president of El Salvador really kind of just saying, like, what do you want me to smuggle? Somebody into the United States? Is that what you guys are asking me? It's preposterous. He actually used the word preposterous when a journalist asked them if he would send this person back to the United States. He's like, you're asking me to smuggle somebody back into the United States? And then there's a clip that I really liked with Marco Rubio, where Rubio really lays down the law and gives a really, I think, clear and concise explanation of what's going on. So please check this one out.
Like, do you allow men to play in women's sports? Do you allow men to box your women and box? Because I know you have a lot of boxing.
That's violence.
That's abuse of a woman.
Against women.
It's abuse of a woman.
Totally.
But we have people that fight to the death because they think men should be able to play in women's sports. And some of those sports, it wouldn't matter much, but it still matters. But some of them are very dangerous for women.
Some years ago, I would say a decade ago or so, women rights movements were pressuring so that we enacted specific laws to avoid men abusing women. And I think those laws were great because there were a lot of men abusing women. But now some of the same people are trying to backtrack on that and actually trying to make new laws allowing men to abuse women in sports. So actually that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense.
It's crazy.
Well, that wasn't exactly the clip we were talking about, Kara Castronova, but that certainly relates to you as a former boxer, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. That was another clip.
Happy accident.
It was, but that was one of my favorite moments. Speaking of that clip, there today, I was happy to see again women boxers, female boxers that have been abused by men. The way that both presidents put it, it's it's abuse of women for women to be fighting men, and I was glad to see that again get recognition at this press conference, because it literally drives me crazy that people still are fighting for this, like the Democrats, like President Trump mentioned, and like this. President of El Salvador saying how it's absolutely ridiculous. This isn't even something they would consider in their country. Well, Democrats are quick to point the finger at Bukele and call him a fascist or a dictator or whatever the case may be. They're the ones who are fighting for the abuse of women in sports. So I just find it to be hypocritical, and always enjoy watching the president talk about men and women's sports, especially when he does the weightlifting analogy, which he did today.
Yeah, and just for in our audience, if you wonder why I said this is a happy accident with Kara Castronova, if you don't know, Kara used to be a boxer. She was also a trainer. So that got a lot of attention last week because there were several profiles of you in Daily Mail, CNN, getting a lot of attention there at the White House, and they noted your boxing background. I bet some of those soy boys from CNN would be afraid to take you on, despite being a man. I don't think they want to get in the ring with you, Kara Castronova. You're pretty tough cookie.
I was actually just outside. I was outside the gate and saw someone, just a young guy, walk by, and he goes, it's you. And he was, not a fan, obviously. He goes, you're the one that asked Trump that stupid question. Like, it's incredible how much that questioned me, just wanting to know what the president's fitness plan was, which I think a lot of Americans that are over the age of 65 would be interested in. It's very difficult to lose weight when you're older. Was enraged outside the gate today, like literally recognized me, but not in a good way, for asking that question. So it's been an interesting couple of days.
Yeah, a lot of female correspondents have been a little worried walking around after the kind of media attention you got last week. But as I noted, we know you can take care of yourself. It's good to see you, Kara. Thank you.
Good to see you too, Emerald.
President Bukele, the man behind those strict prisons where Trump has been offloading so many of the illegals who were allowed to invade our country during the Biden regime, talked about how he turned his own country from a crime-ridden third world nation to a budding tourism hub. Bukele and Trump clearly have a close rapport. Lots of joking and banter between the two. In this clip, Trump is showing Bukele around the Oval Office, and when the two leaders admire the portrait of FDR, Bukele jokes that FDR served 4 terms, just like Trump will. Looks like he knows how to work Donald Trump. Clearly, these two are natural allies. Take a listen.
And in fact, Mr. President, you have 350 million people to liberate. Yeah. But to liberate 350 million people, you have to imprison some. That's the way it works, right? You cannot just, free the criminals and think crime's going to go down magically. You have to imprison them so you can liberate 350 million Americans that are asking for the end of crime and the end of terrorism. And it can be done. I mean, you're doing it already.
And I think we should dwell on that last bit in Bukele's recent Oval Office statement, because to us, it sounds like the El Salvadoran leader is far more interested in ending the illegal immigration crisis in the U.S. than, or even many in the Democratic Party, and even, let's be honest, some globalist Republicans in Congress as well. Joining us now to dive into these matters is Dr. Jack Cruz. He's a respected neurosurgeon. He also is one of the most prolific freedom fighters out there, a voice that I've long respected. So it's such a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Cruz, and have you on our show. And some people may be asking, well, what's he doing joining us to talk about Bukele and Trump? Well, you now reside in El Salvador, Dr. Cruz. So we're so pleased to have you with us.
Hey, no problem.
I know you talked to Bukele. I know you know him now as a resident of El Salvador. Bukele talked about how he has turned the country around. Is that a fair assessment? Is that an honest depiction of what he has done in El Salvador, Dr. Cruz?
Well, yeah, he's done that and a whole lot more. I mean, when I first came down here 5 years ago in his first term, it was to scout out a place to build a new clinic, down here. And at that time, MS-13 was still running wild down here. And he decided to use part of his constitution called the exception regime. And this was probably 2 weeks before his Bitcoin national legal tender law. And literally overnight, extortion was ended. In fact, just this morning, after I finished seeing patients here, I had $50,000 in my car to go to the bank to make a deposit. Nobody, and this was sitting in a bag right in the side of my car. You don't have to worry about any crime down here. You're safer here than any place you are in the United States. I can say this as an American citizen, that there's no question about that. After me relocating here and opening a clinic with El Salvador, President Bukele asked me to actually write a medical freedom law for the country, which I wrote for him in 2023, which includes many of the things that are in the law. Why? Because I actually shared that law with Bobby Kennedy when he was running against Trump. So President Bukele has done many things that I think people in the United States don't realize. There's a lot of people in the States that understand it because they've been coming down here for tourism. But you can see our weather is beautiful. We're right on the Pacific Ocean. You can be as safe as you could ever imagine in any city in the United States. The people of El Salvador absolutely love him. He's got over a 90% approval rating. The other thing that doesn't get talked enough about, I think, in American media is that he also has 95% of the Congress behind him that's down here. So this is a guy who's done some, I would say, some pretty controversial things with the globalist media, where they've convinced people that, he's a dictator. I can tell you, being here for now almost going on 5 years, there's nothing about this gentleman that's a dictator. He's about freedom. He's about returning sovereignty to people. He's returned sovereignty first in money, Now he's doing it in healthcare. And now he's actually trying to help the United States out with the lawlessness that went on with the open border. So from my viewpoint, to be quite frank with you, I think America would probably make a trade for President Bukele for their own president. Why? Because he's totally about freedom, totally about safety, totally about sovereignty across many different, angles. And I'm glad to see that President Trump actually has invited the most popular and best president. We call him the GOAT of presidents down here. So I'm very pleased with President Bukele.
He's very maligned in the corporate media here in the United States, as you said. I think that's one reason they probably didn't do that typical joint presser, because it just, they would not have been very friendly or even respectful to President Bukele. I think this is a good sit down. I think this is probably the start to something more, because as you can see, obviously Trump found him engaging, and Bukele has already proven his concepts in his own country. So I think he could be a good ally of President Trump and a good example as well. What I found interesting, and I don't think got a lot of coverage, is that the United States President Trump did approach Bukele about El Salvador being a safe third country, so a place to put illegals from other countries, right, that weren't being repatriated to their own. He said, no, that wasn't in the best interest of El Salvador. He wouldn't be a safe third country, but he would detain the Tren Aragua gang members, MS-13. They didn't meet there on that aspect, but he clearly kept El Salvador first as he's talking about helping the United States as well, which made me respect him.
Well, I will tell you, Emerald, I don't know if you know this, but I have a clinic also in Destin, Florida, and who used to be my congressman there was Matt Gaetz. I wrote Matt Gaetz 8 letters over the period of the last 5 years to tell him about what was going on here in El Salvador. And to Matt's credit, before, he was shown the door, he's the entry point for the Trump regime, getting introduced to Bukele. And Bukele has totally cleaned up just about everything. When you talk about the gangs were the biggest problem in El Salvador. So this is a point that's near and dear to the heart of President Bukele. So anything that he can do to help Trump out with this endeavor, I just don't see that it's being a problem. And obviously there's other possibilities that could come from this relationship. But let's face it, he's a 42-year-old president. He's a good-looking guy. He looks good in front of the camera. When he came up to CPAC last year and gave that spectacular speech, he was speaking to Americans before the new president, got elected. And what did he tell us? He said, look, why do we pay taxes? It's because our money's failing. There's things in the United States that when the new president gets in, they have to be like a doctor. They have to make a proper diagnosis of what the problem is. And Trump's clearly put a line in the sand when it comes to illegal immigration. And anything that Bukele can do to help him out in that endeavor, it doesn't surprise me in the least that this alliance has come to fore. I just hope that it's the beginning of many other things where the United States, the big gorilla on the block, can learn from the new country that's decided to make law and order part of what their, national agenda really is.
I know that Trump's advisors do look to other countries that do things well. I remember in the first term, the director of the Domestic Policy Council would often say, what would Hungary do when it comes to family policy, right? Trying to increase the birth rate, trying to make it better for moms to actually mother their children. So in this aspect, I could say, Stephen Miller saying, what would El Salvador do when it comes to that? You mentioned that speech at CPAC, and you particularly monetary policy, and that was really good. We actually have that soundbite from CPAC where Bukele talked about the mass printing of money and the future of currency. Listen.
The government is funded by money printing, paper backed with paper, a bubble that will inevitably burst. The situation is even worse than it seems, because if most Americans and the rest of the world were to become aware of this farce, confidence in your currency would be lost. The dollar would fall, and the Western civilization with it.
What do you see the future of the U.S. currency and the role of Bitcoin for us?
Well, for me, I mean, there's a funny backstory to that clip you just showed. 5 days before that, I was at President Bukele's brother's wedding, and he came up to me and told me that he was going to speak at CPAC 5 days. He said, I don't know what I'm going to talk about. And I told him straight up, I said, tell him the truth about money. People forget that President Bukele made Bitcoin legal tender here four and a half years ago. And this was not a popular move either in El Salvador or anywhere else. He got a lot of heat from it. But here's the interesting thing. The Bitcoiners that are out there love Bukele for doing it. You know, people like Jack Mallers and Jack Dorsey and things like that. But what really played a role here is when Bobby Kennedy was running for president, Trump was running for president, they both aligned on the same issue that, look, if you really understand most of our political problems in the United States, they always funnel back to money. We saw that with USAID. We're seeing it with the corruption, you know, in Congress, where, you know, we have people that make $140,000 a year, yet they have $220 million in the bank. We get what the problem is. The problem is in the United States, to really fix most of these political issues, Bukele decided the first maneuver he did before he put MS-13 in jail was to give sovereignty and money back. And that's the message that he delivered in that CPAC speech, because to be quite frank with you, I don't think a lot of Americans really understand why their house is worth $500,000 more. It's not because the house is worth more. It's because the money's failing. And because the money's failing, because we have bad monetary policy, because the banks are running wild, we saw that in the great financial crisis, we need money that the government can't mess with. And that's what Bitcoin is. Why? Because they can't inflate it. And any politician that gets behind Bitcoin, what are they effectively telling the leaders, or I should say the voters in that country? They're actually telling you that we're no longer going to steal from you. Because that's what inflation is. It's legalized stealing. It's a tax without any legislation. And when you start to see politicians come out and say, look, I want to back our monetary policy with Bitcoin, this is a big maneuver. And in the United States, I don't think we're going to get rid of global reserve currency status for the American dollar. But what Trump and Bobby Kennedy have been talking about is let's make a reserve to back the American dollar by Bitcoin. Why? Because then people who are in the States, people who even live outside the States, they don't have to worry about the dollar being devalued. And why is this a big deal, Emerald? For the reason you really brought me on here is, remember that President Bukele's country, before he was president, lost their currency in their civil war. So now they're a dollarized economy. So they use US dollars. So we have two different reserve currencies here in El Salvador, both Bitcoin and US dollars. So anything that happens to the US dollar really matters to the people in El Salvador.
Speaking of which, do you think that El Salvador will stay on the US dollar?
For the future, yes. But do I think, based on what I think could happen with Bitcoin, I believe that it's going to happen sooner than later, because I think if you look at monetary policy with fiat and what's going on with the Fed chairman, let's face it, let's be very frank with your audience. We have $27 trillion of debt that has to be refinanced in the next 18 months. And if you look at the 10-year note, what do you see? You see that the levels are too high. If you now realize that we spend more on the debt to finance it than we do for the military, than for entitlement spending, this is something that absolutely has to go away. So when people talk nonsense about Trump and what he's doing with the tariffs, I don't think they realize what the real target of the tariffs are, is to try to get that 10-year down so that America can refinance their debt so that we all don't go broke. Because if you want to know the truth, the Federal Reserve right now is bankrupt. America is effectively bankrupt, but nobody wants to talk about that in the media. Why? Because they think they're going to spook the taxpayer. I think the taxpayer already knows that, because when they go to refi their house, they find out that the interest rates jumped up, and they want to know why their house values in certain places have gone up so much. It's because the money's worth less. It's not because your house is worth more.
Yeah, people are, I've noticed people are having problems getting the funding for houses now. They'll go under contract and it's falling out. They can't even get the loan right now. Real quick, we have 1 minute, and I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about Bobby Kennedy, since you are friends and you are one of the architects of the Maha platform. 1 minute, what are your thoughts on his performance thus far?
Maha is ha-ha, according to Uncle Jack. I'm not a fan of what I'm seeing, but I will tell you that I do believe that Bobby is being hindered by some of my old Senate guys, specifically Cassidy and Kennedy in Louisiana. And I will just say to you that I'm going to give Bobby a little bit more time. I've been pretty scathing to him on my X feed, but I believe when you write the book that he wrote about Fauci and when you talk about the things that you've talked about, it's time to put up or shut up. And, you know, I don't care about the rumors that Candace has brought up or that Ian Carroll brought up. I really don't care. The bottom line is the people put Kennedy and Trump together so that we can get truth for medical freedom and we can get to the bottom of this messenger RNA platform. Just remember, 60 million Americans have taken this jab since the last one's come out. We now have 10 million children that have gotten loaded with a bioweapon. I can tell you in El Salvador, President Bukele listened to me 2 years ago and stopped that nonsense. That nonsense needs to stop in the United States. And we got behind Bobby with all the Maha moms, and it's time to put up or shut up. We need not people removed from their jobs. We need people arrested. Send them to CCOT, send them to Gitmo, but it's time.
Absolutely. And Dr. Cruz, you have this great interview out there with Callie Means, you and Dr. Mary Bowden. I played several clips from that on this show. I watch it sometimes watch it again because it's one of the best sit downs I've ever seen. I hope you'll come back, Dr. Cruz. It's so lovely to chat with you. We hope you'll join us again soon.
No problem. It was a pleasure.
Hello, everyone. I'm excited to announce the next generation of energy drinks, Rev 7. It has no sugar and no caffeine. Instead, Rev 7 uses Go BHB. Go BHB is one of the body's primary ketones, and it provides the most efficient and clean fuel that your body needs. It also helps you stay energized all day with no crashes. Not only that, it produces 3 times more brain energy than sugar, which helps boost your memory, focus, and mental sharpness. It also helps reduce stress and helps balance your mood. Rev 7 does all that while being the best tasting energy drink ever. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save 20% today. I'm so sure you're going to love Rev 7. For a limited time, you get our introductory 3-pack absolutely free. I drink Rev 7 every day and I absolutely love it, and so will you.
And speaking of Maha, one of the key architects behind the first Trump administration's disastrous Operation Warp Speed has lashed out against RFK Jr. It's not really surprising, though, is it? Considering Marks quit before he was fired his job after RFK Jr. was confirmed as the new Health and Human Services Secretary. Here is Peter Marks on CBS News yesterday demanding that RFK Jr., who already endorsed the MMR vaccines to combat the alleged measles outbreak in Texas, do more to show his undying love and fealty to vaccines.
If you can hear my voice right now and you have a child that is unvaccinated against measles, we have measles spreading in this country very significantly. You wouldn't put your child in a back seat of a car without being strapped into their car seat. You want to get your child vaccinated against measles so that they don't have a 1 in 1,000 chance of dying from measles if they contract it.
When you watch that, you are absolutely sure it's a cult with these pro-vax people. That was so creepy. You will bow down or you will be shamed, isolated, and destroyed for your insolence. Joining us now is Karen Kingston. She is the renowned biotech analyst and author of the popular Kingston Report on Substack. Kara, the way he looked into the camera on Face the Nation was said, if you're listening to my voice right now, I mean, that was so creepy. It's like he was trying to use hypnosis. But What do you make of Dr. Peter Marks coming out here now to slam RFK Jr. and push the measles messaging again?
It's what you said. He's trying to create a cult following based in fear, basically, right? He's trying to terrorize parents into getting their children injected with the measles, mumps, rubella antigens, which are pathogens, meaning they cause diseases, in the diseases of measles, mumps, and rubella. And so I think this man has, as you and I reported on last time I was on, he's a tyrant and he's a bully, and he was a tyrant and a bully, and the king of the FDA, of the Centers for Biologic Evaluations Research at the FDA, and essentially the FDA. So I think the other thing is that on the MAHA movement, many of us felt disappointed that RFK Jr. said the best way to prevent measles is to get the MMR shot, and now he's going to the far extreme to saying, well, that's not enough. You have to tell parents you must get the shot. Otherwise, it's like putting them in a car without a car seat, or a seat belt. And that's just insane. And he said there was a 1 in 1,000 chance of a child dying from measles. I saw Dr. Sherry Tenpenny on one of the social media feeds, and she cited that in 1962, just before the shot came out, the statistics was actually 1 in 2 million chance of a child dying from the measles. So I think this is another fear campaign. And I think Dr. Peter Marks is, like I said, he's just a tyrant and a bully. And it's interesting that I had said I believed last time I was on your show, based on everything I looked at, that he was the one that was blocking RFK Jr. from accessing the databases at the FDA to prove that the COVID shots were not only, ineffective, but dangerous and lethal, and from all of the childhood vaccine data and adult data. And in fact, he confessed that, I believe it was on CBS on the following Monday. He just said, yeah, I was the one that was basically not allowing RFK Jr. to look at the data because I don't trust him and his team, because I think they would manipulate the data or delete files. And I think, what they, was a girl in Nazi Germany, the propaganda said, blame your enemy of what you're guilty of, right? And so who knows how much damage Peter Marks did in regards to damaging the databases, right, and deleting files, or if he's still got people there that are doing that. And I did see, I believe it was yesterday morning, that RFK Jr. started ousting people that were loyalists to Fauci, and I hope he ousts people that are loyalists to Peter Marks.
Which are really a lot of the same people. And I want to get back to that in a moment, but real quick, I just want to point out, it's not that Marks is just a true believer. It's probably likely that he has a vested interest in continuing to push these kind of vaccines and gene therapies, because when Marks resigned from the government, Karen, he admitted to pushing through 22 experimental gene therapies in his resignation letter, saying, quote, during my tenure as center director, we approved 22 gene therapies, including the first gene therapy ever to be approved in the United States. However, we know that we must do better to expedite the development of treatments for those individuals suffering from any one of the thousands of diseases potentially addressable by the advances in molecular medicine over the past decades. So I assume that Marks is also making a pretty good amount of money on for his efforts.
I can't speak to that, but I can tell you in regards to the gene therapies, the first one that was approved, Janet Woodcock overrode all of the, and Peter Marks reported and Janet Woodcock overrode all of the FDA advisors and employees who said, they didn't meet their primary endpoint. There's too many serious adverse events and there's deaths. And then again, I think it was 2022, in the company Sarepta, that was a gene therapy where there were teenage childhood deaths in the various phase 3 trials by age segment. They didn't meet their primary endpoints, and none of the FDA employees or advisors, they all said, we don't approve this. And Peter Marks single-handedly approved those gene therapies. And these aren't his words, but Janet Woodcock, his boss, had said, well, we need to sacrifice safety in the name of science. And by safety, they mean children and adults. So when you say you're sacrificing safety, you need to replace that word with human beings. And they're sacrificing our children in the name of science. And I want to point out that Janet Woodcock was in the 97, she was a deciding person that pushed over the edge the approval of a T-cell blocker called Posicor for heart blood pressure. And what happened was people developed AFib and they had to get ventilators, right? And she was working for the industry that she was supposed to be regulating. And I think that's what Peter Marks is doing. So whether or not he was financially benefiting while he was employed by the federal government, I don't know. But I did see an interview with him where the newscaster, whether it was MSNBC or CBS or, they're all the same, said, well, I'm really sorry what happened to you. And he said, I'll be fine. I will land fine. And, he's going to have multiple 6 and 7 figure and 8 figure offers made to him. So he will be fine. And the fact that he wasn't fired, he can still contract with DARPA if he wanted to.
That's scary. And that's a great point. I hadn't even thought about that one yet. Karen. So it's, that's where RFK should have just fired him, right? He should have fired him instead of pressuring him to resign, which RFK did. Could he have done that? Would he still been able to contract with the federal government? I didn't even think about the fact that he could still partner with DARPA.
Well, just as being a former executive and running a company myself, firing people is it's much easier to get them to resign than to fire them, right? And so I will say that. I will say that. But my point is that Peter, I think the majority of cash that for these higher ups in our federal agencies, specifically within HHS, the majority of cash influx isn't while they're in office. It comes when they exit. And that's where the promises are. But, Peter Marks did say that, and Nicholas Hulscher pointed this out. There was an interview that he did, I believe, on MSNBC, where he said, I don't just do vaccines. I work, with DARPA on biological agents as well. And,
right.
Talk about the potential of a future pandemic. So this is I think he's a dangerous man. That's just my opinion. But again, I've been following him for 2 years, and he has recklessly approved products. I think Janet Woodcock saying that we have to, which was his boss saying that we have to sacrifice science for safety, and that's the motto of our FDA. There's the corruption and the greed and the arrogance and the ego runs very deep and strong in that agency. So I think it's great that he's ousted. At the end of the day, would it have been better if he was fired? From a legal perspective in regards to him being able to collaborate with the government, yes. But again, firing people there's a lot more ramifications to it.
Well, I hope you're right on this reporting, and that RFK Jr. is maybe sloughing off some of the Fauci and potentially Mark's minions. We'll follow up on that. Karen Kingston, we're out of time, though. It's good to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Good to see you. Thank you. God bless.
If you want to feel and look your best, you need to check out Pure Health Research. They have 45 premium health supplements that are designed to help you with everyday health goals. Whether it's boosting your energy or trimming belly fat, supporting healthy blood sugar, pumping your testosterone up, or even reducing swelling in your legs, Pure Health Research Supplement Store has you covered. Each formula is crafted with natural, non-GMO ingredients, backed by clinical research and manufactured right here in the USA. And here's the best part. Pure Health Research is offering you an exclusive 35% discount. Just go to purehealthresearch.com and use promo code Lindell at checkout. With their 365-day money-back guarantee, there's nothing to lose. So head over to purehealthresearch.com now, explore their 45 amazing supplements, and save 35% before this deal ends with promo code Lindell.
These are sick people. Mark, do you have something to say?
Yeah, Stephen outlined it. I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin. Except for Venezuela, that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President. No, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple.
The court specifically said he couldn't be sent back to El Salvador, though.
The Supreme Court said exactly what Marco said. that no court has the authority to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. We won a case 9-0, and people like CNN are portraying it as a loss, as usual, because they want foreign terrorists in the country who kidnap women and children.
That was an amazing moment in the Oval Office earlier today. Stephen Miller and Secretary of State Marco Rubio pretty much making it clear that the corporate media is siding with traffickers and kidnappers. If you've noticed, a key question throughout today's show has been, why is the corporate media, why are Democrats, and let's be honest, some Republicans, so committed to bringing violent illegal immigrants who have been deported, okay? They're proven violent criminals. They've been legally deported by President Trump. Why are they so committed to bringing them back into the United States? Illegals such as the California soccer coach who broke into the United States after leaving El Salvador and proceeded to strangle one of his 13-year-old soccer players to death in California. Our next guest, a federal immigration whistleblower, Carlos Arellano, reported this on his X account saying, quote, illegal from El Salvador who killed a 13-year-old boy faces death penalty. Death penalty is the only appropriate punishment in this case. I tend to agree. And when you know it, the left in America is going crazy over this. Frankly, justifiable and fair decision by El Salvadoran courts, which President Bukele has cleaned up. Does the left really just hate ordinary Americans that much that they'd side with obvious violent criminals who entered our country illegally and murdered children? Or is it something more? I'm joined now by that federal whistleblower, a man who has an innate understanding of how the Biden regime trafficked illegal immigrants, especially children, from the broken or the intentionally broken U.S.-Mexico border into the United States. He has a keen knowledge of how nonprofit organizations benefited financially from those moves. And congratulations, Carlos, you're also now a contributor to the Gateway Pundit. We're so pleased to have you with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's great to have a show like yours where you can come on and you guys are not blinded by the whole, oh well, everything's great now, and it's not. There's still a lot going on and people just choose to ignore it. So I enjoy coming on here. Thank you for having me.
And I have a feeling we're going to hear from you that some of these NGOs are still operating actively. That's been a focus for several years now. We have with the visit of Bukele to the Oval Office and the interaction with the media and then the general media coverage around it, we see how the machine works, right? Because they're still pushing this open border policy that has been largely facilitated by the NGOs. What have you noticed lately, Carlos?
Well, I was down in Colombia in South America, and I was in the town called
You just got back, right?
Yeah, I
Not
just
long
got
ago.
back from a town. Yeah, from a town called Nicoclí, and Nicoclí is the entrance of the Darien Gap right before you get to Panama, and it's the town where my illegals go to get on boats and head towards the Darien Gap. And according to the current administration and everybody on X, all the influencers, they say, oh, the border crisis is over. There's no one crossing. Well, they're really wrong about that. When I was down there, I met a good handful, maybe between 50 to 100 people while the time I was down there, that they were heading towards the Darien Gap. They were heading up north. And down there, you have the Red Cross of Colombia, who proudly displays sponsored by the EU, the European Union, funded by them. And I went in there pretending to be an illegal myself, and they offered me a free cell phone. They offered me tablets to clean my water in the Darien Gap jungle. They offered me a tent. They were offering me supplies to survive the jungle. And it's not just them in this town in Nicoclí, in the northern side of Colombia. You also got other multiple NGOs in this town, like Hayes and a few others who are just there. They claim to be there for humanitarian reasons, but it's also for trafficking, and the border crisis is not over. The only reason we knew all the numbers before was because Biden made it legal to just walk right over to the points of entry. We're not going to know the numbers of people that the cartel are smuggling in. The cartel doesn't call the White House and say, "Hey, we smuggled 300 in today. Make sure you write those numbers down." It's still a big issue. There's been no arrest until some arrests happen from someone at the top of an NGO or one of these sanctuary city mayors or one of the governors. It's not going to be taken seriously. I mean, you have Katie Hobbs, who's the governor of Arizona, and Gavin Newsom at California, who share some of the southern border. I highly doubt they're prosecuting people who are there's the Good Samaritans camp who camp right by the border wall in Arizona, and they're who knows how many people they're letting in, and it's I saw it for myself in Colombia. They said it was over. It's not over. I interviewed two people in southern in Colombia who came from Peru, and they told me that in Ecuador, right before you get to Colombia, there's Americans down in Ecuador, and I asked them, maybe you confused them for British. Are you sure they weren't from the UK? There's a lot of countries who speak English. They're like, no, they told us they're from America, from the United States of America. And they told us they're down there at the border of Ecuador helping any migrants who need to get up to the US. So we got American NGO workers all the way as far as down as the border of Peru and Ecuador, helping migrants get up to Colombia. It's insane. It's insane, and we're not going to be taken seriously until someone's made an example out of.
That's a great point. And I think you could extrapolate that beyond just the immigration issue, right? We talked about that a little bit with Dr. Jack Cruz, who actually is based in El Salvador now and was talking about what Bukele's been doing there just a moment ago. But he was saying the same thing about the medical freedom movement, right? That there has to be people arrested. But getting back to the border, the NGOs are still operating. There are still illegal migrants making their way at least up to Colombia and the Darien Gap, believing they're going to make it across the border. You know that the cartel's not going to say, hey, they're not just going to bring them to the points of entry. They're not going to say, hey, we're bringing them across. Do you believe that that is why Donald Trump has now ordered the militarization of federal parkland across the border? That news broke over the weekend. Is this why he's doing this now? And do you believe that will be effective?
I believe it will be effective, but and I do believe that's why he's doing it. I do think he's trying his best to do something different, but he gets no help from Congress. And I think the only thing Congress has passed is the Lake and Riley Act, and then they started arguing about pregnant mothers who can vote from home or not, and then they've just been wasting time. But I think they should have passed more laws to help out President Trump at the border, and I do think it'll make a difference. But at the same time, you just don't know. The Mexican army the Mexican military is very shady, and they cut deals to make money, and then who knows who. Until we scare some of these people into actually cooperating with us. But Trump can only do so much. He needs help from Congress, and but I do believe it's a good move to place uh, military all over across the southern border because the states aren't cooperating. Arizona, California. I was in California as well, and they're housing people for using federal funds, and they just don't care because they don't think they're ever going to get arrested. And I think it's not just the southern wall border that's an issue. I think the issue is within the blue states too, because none of them are afraid of the current administration. Yeah, it's a kind of a joke, and it also goes outside of the country too. I was in Mexico before I was in Colombia, and they just laugh at you. They make fun of me for being American, and they say, "Oh, when are you going to get your sex change?" And I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "Well, because you're American."
That is
Everybody
so
looks at
bad.
us and
They
yeah,
make fun of you
yeah.
because of the crazy stuff that's been pushed by Marxist communist revolutionaries in our country, the transgenderism.
Yeah, and this is coming from like the military and the
Wow.
state police in Mexico, where they're like, "Hey, you must be a transgender because you're American." They make all these kinds of jokes,
That is so bad.
and yeah, we're looked at as a joke right now, and it's because there's no actual enforcement of the laws. I would love to see Mayor Wu be arrested out of Boston. She's crazy, and Gavin Newsom. Even Mayor Adams out of New York City, he thinks he can switch parties right now and all is forgiven.
Oh
He
yeah.
trashed New York City early on. And he thinks, oh, well, I like President Trump now. Forgive me for what I did. He called me a liar when I came out as a whistleblower. Because I used to work at the Migrant Hotel in New York City, and I brought up the issue that was going on in New York and everything that was happening early on. And Mayor Adams said, no, that whistleblower is a liar. So I got problems with that guy where like, oh, you think you can make us forget what you did, but you were the one who trashed New York City in the beginning early on. And it's just these people are getting away with it. He was
So
under
just to wrap this
investigation.
up with a bow, I just want to make sure I wrap this up with a bow. Even though they have looked at the funding and they are stopping a lot of the flow of funding to NGOs, they're still able to operate. They're still operating and will do so until there's actual criminal repercussions. Is that what you're saying to
Correct.
us?
Correct. Someone needs to be made an example out of. As someone from an NGO or someone from a sanctuary city or a state. That needs to happen soon. At least one person.
That helps us understand exactly the situation we find ourselves in now. Carlos, anything else we should look out for that you're working on right now? Just so you know, you can follow Carlos on X and be sure to look for his work now on the Gateway Pundit. What else should we expect to be looking out for in the next bit?
Well, at the Gateway Pundit, there's just so many things to go do undercover work on that I've decided to write them now. And it's easier to write articles than have to visit each one. So I'll be doing like a meet the NGO. I'm working on an article right now of an NGO in Colorado who helps illegals get unemployment insurance up to $748 per week of
Wow.
unemployment insurance. And this is in Colorado. They made it legal, so the NGO is not doing anything illegal because the state of Colorado has made it legal. They made a separate fund to give them unemployment insurance. Just a lot of people don't know that it's going on. So I'm working on an
Colorado
article
is
about that.
becoming
But
more like California by the day, I would say.
yeah,
Carlos
yeah.
Arellano, it's so good to see you. When you have your next piece out, we'll have you back to discuss. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Emerald. Have a good one.
With everybody talking about making America healthy again, I thought today'd be a great day to talk to all my fellow patriots about the importance of making your homes healthy again. Well, we have proudly partnered with airwaterhealing.com and their revolutionary whole home air purification system. The V3 from Air Water Healing does 3,000 square feet of purification. It eliminates dust, mold, viruses, and odors. But here's the part I love. They require no filters to ever be changed and virtually no maintenance. Whether you suffer from asthma, allergies, seasonal bronchitis, or just want to protect your family from the flu or even greater threats, don't wait to get your V3 from airwaterhealing.com today. Use code Lindell for 20% off in savings and free shipping. That's promo code Lindell at airwaterhealing.com.
I have so much gratitude that we're able to do this. It's not about going to space, it's about what we bring back.
My 92-year-old grandfather is making the journey to see the flight.
I'm gonna be very emotional this weekend.
This journey really is about healing. It's just that my healing takes me to the stars.
It's never too late to fulfill your dreams.
All of them said, I think you should do it. All of them, much to my surprise, including Oprah.
It's a big journey.
Oh man, that made me laugh. That was a promo for Blue Origin's rocket launch earlier today. What private space startup is owned by Jeff Bezos, who you may have recognized, literally sent his fiance, Lauren Sanchez, into orbit. He might be the envy of many a man now in America, but only to have the rocket return to Earth a mere 10 minutes after liftoff. As Sanchez and the other ladies can attest, I am sure at least 8 of those 10 minutes were pure hype, followed by a letdown. But what exactly was the point of this? 10 minutes? Technically speaking, since 2021, the Blue Origin New Shepard rocket takes passengers into suborbital space so they can get their astronaut wings, and Bezos can keep interest in his fledgling space startup, despite it clearly being upstaged by Elon Musk's SpaceX. Now, there's been some speculation that women might be better equipped for space travel because of how radiation in space affects female bodies differently from men. Well, let's get real. It was a publicity stunt. And it was a weird one at that. Gayle King, a crying Katy Perry, and of course the owner's side piece turned second wife. I mean, couldn't we have done a little bit better than this, Bezos? I mean, at least Bezos couldn't have just sent the entire cast of The View in orbit. Now that I could have been celebrating, especially if he'd left him stranded up there. We don't need more catwalks in space. Please don't make the girl boss phenomenon that has destroyed Earth go galactic. What we need are men and women who actually have knowledge about science and technology going into orbit and beyond. That's what will keep people interested in space, not sending has-beens and hags into orbit just to have them return 10 minutes later talking about how grateful they are for the sun goddess or whatever. And that's the absolute truth.